All right, Primo, we are on. Hello.
Hello.
For anyone who will be listening to this outside of our moms and cousins, who is Nefi Lopez?
Okay, Nefi Lopez is a little Mexican boy from Houston, Texas, who's got big dreams, achieved some of them, but still has a long way to go.
That's it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I can tell you a little bit more about myself if you want. So more on as far as what I do. So Nefi Lopez is an attorney based out of Houston, Texas, and swapping from third person to first person.
Exactly.
I'm a I would consider myself a serial entrepreneur. I've got a bunch of different businesses. I'm in the entertainment space like yourself. I'm an esports lawyer in addition to owning a personal injury law firm here in Houston, Texas, a civil litigator, a trial lawyer. I also own a talent agency and recently actually are getting into professional trading card games. And so, doing all kinds of different stuff, trying to stay at the forefront of entertainment and tech and games. And so there's nothing that's outside of my reach that I won't try to dip my hand into at some point. And so that's probably more of my new recent involvements. But overall, deal with hurt people, help them in their situations, and also deal with professional athletes, professional video game players, professional entertainers, streamers on different platforms, and help them solve their legal issues. And I talk about that too. So one of the premier, I guess you can say, authorities in the gaming and esports space as far as the law is involved.
Let's go. I'm
Yeah,
proud to call you
just
my
to name a
cousin.
few.
I know, and that's honestly that's what's crazy. I didn't even know about the talent agency or the pro card games. That's really awesome. That's yeah, that's insane. I want to actually ask you about that once I get further to the conversation.
Yeah.
The whole reason, like I was telling you right before we started, the reason I started this podcast and wanted to chat with you is simply because I believe that when people do, when people make better choices in their life and it stacks up, they tend to be happier, they tend to find success, and more importantly, they inspire people right in their, immediate surroundings, their circle, whether it's a coworker, a family friend, a neighbor. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that people can do in their life is make good choices for themselves that impact other people's lives. And you've done that. So that's why I wanted to, you're doing it. Now you have done it. It's not like you're out of here, you know what I'm saying? But you're doing it, and I respect that a lot.
Thank you.
I want to know first about you playing saxophone because I had no idea. All I knew is that you were a gamer and
Yeah,
that was your
dude.
life. And then I'm over here like, what? You play the sax?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Was
it's kind of a funny story. If there's any listeners that grew up young with young immigrant either children or with immigrant parents, that growing up, your parents want you to be involved in as many things as possible, whether it's sports, music, choir, whatever it is that you can get involved in. Your parents want you to get involved in. And so for whatever reason, my parents were hell bent on me and my siblings all picking up some kind of musical talent. It started off with piano lessons with, other people we went to church with, and then eventually to learning an instrument. And for whatever reason, the saxophone was the one that I landed on. I don't know why. I thought it was really cool. And I played everything from soprano to alto to tenor to baritone to the bari sax, as we call it. And did pretty good. Honestly, I was pretty decent. I was an all-stater in Texas, which for those of you guys that know, you basically compete at different levels, and then all the way until you make it to like the final state band. And I ended up getting kicked out because I could make any of their practices because my mom did know how important it was to get me to those practices, and I didn't really prioritize it. And so I wasn't in it for very long, but I made it. And so
Oh
I was
man.
I was a pretty
Hey,
decent I was a pretty decent sax player.
what's that song? Careless Whisper. Can you play
Careless
that?
Whisper. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah, I could play that.
Let's go. One thing it's so funny about the saxophone. I played trumpet, so like for some reason, seventh grade, they were like, "You got to join band,"
Yeah.
and I thought, I don't know why I thought that like playing a trumpet would be like the coolest thing. It was like the worst.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm
Yeah.
thankful I did it because reading music is actually a really cool talent.
Yeah.
And when I think back to my youth, I actually wish I would have, instead of, the trumpet, I would have for sure played the piano because the percussion, for example, is when I see drums, I just like need to get on them and like,
Yeah.
start jamming and, anyway, all right. Some of the topics I wanted to cover for the people that are going to be listening from this point forward. Number one is you always stick to your moral values. Ever since I've watched you grow up, you have probably had reasons to maybe not necessarily stick to specific values, and you've been a prime example of what that really means, in my opinion. I also want to go over a quote that goes along with that you said to me, which is, "I knew I had to be the one." And that, like, I know that sounds silly, but there's a lot of power to that, which is, why I wanted to wait till right now, to tell you that quote really made me think a lot. The second thing or the third thing, I want to talk about how that choice, that mentality, how that's impacted you to become the lawyer that you are, the leader that you are, the family man that you are. And then finally, you kind of touched on it. You're in the talent space. I want to know a little bit more about the gaming law, AI stuff like that, and how through your college experience, right? You last time I hung out with you, we were hanging out with NFL players, you know, or actually you weren't even there, but I was there hanging out with them because of you.
Yeah.
And I was like, how the hell did this happen? So let's dive in first into your moral, that moral compass. What where did that come from? And why is it so ingrained in you?
Yeah, yeah. So I was born and I grew up in Utah. As you know, Utah is an ultra conservative, very religious place. And being Hispanic, we are probably a little more loosey goosey with the rules. Sometimes, you could be, for those of you guys that are listening and are familiar with Utah, I'm a member of the church, right? I'm LDS, and things are pretty black and white with the church. It's a very and one of the flaws, I think, it could be inflexible at times. It doesn't really um, mesh well with the changing times and can be a little rigid, which is a turnoff for a lot of people. And so I think all things, including religion and moderation, can be good. And so I think if you take at least that approach with some of the things, and sticking to your morals is hard, because if you stick to them when it's convenient, then you can't, you don't really, if you don't stand for anything, then it's kind of hard to be successful in a lot of things. There's certain things that you have to have as concrete. These are non-negotiable aspects of it. And pretty early on, being exposed to some of the realities of life, parents getting divorces, moving from a different state, moving to a different school, growing up in an impoverished background, you experience a lot of things. And you really, it's through your experiences that you become the person that you are, and you learn sort of the good, the bad of all people. Being a member of the church, I've seen a lot of bad aspects of not just the LDS church, because I don't think there's a perfect church out there, but religion in general. For those of you guys that know, I went to school being LDS, which is funny. I went to a Baptist university. I went to Houston Baptist University, which in Texas, the Southern Baptists are some of the biggest opponents of the LDS church, and so they directly preach against some of the crazier aspects of our religion that seems just so foreign to non-members, and to people that are familiar with the church. And so, I've experienced all kinds of different things, and I've seen the good, the bad, and I use my free will to choose I really like this about this. I really don't like about this. And I don't really allow other things or people to necessarily influence me in a way to where it would get in the way of what I truly believe and what I care about. And so for me, as you know, family is a big thing. I think relationship with a higher power is important to have, regardless of who you believe in or what you believe in. I think it's hard to live life without believing in anything. And I'm not going to get into religion by any means, but that's just a personal belief that I have. And you have to have some type of guiding moral compass to help you align your decisions, right? You got to have some big goal at the end of the day. And for me, it's do good, make this place a better place than it was yesterday, and make it a better place when I leave. Whether it's for my wife, for my kids, for my family, or for the people that I help, right? Whether it's my clients, whatever it is I'm doing, I want to make it better for others, and that's a big thing. And so, religion inherently is a factor in I guess morality for me, as a sense. I did study a lot of philosophy whenever I was in college, and there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. And so whether it's deity given or just nature, there's good and bad, and you have to have some kind of moral compass. And so I try to stick with mine as much as I can. I've learned that when your intentions are good, the things you do tend to succeed, versus when you're not. And that's a tough lesson that I think people need to learn. Right? Don't use other people as a means to an end. That's a very famous philosophical ideal, and I take that to heart. I love people and I treat people as people and not as means to ends. And you'll notice relationships will be a lot better, whether it's business, personal, whatever. And so, you learn lessons as you grow and you go through things. I'm still a young guy, but I've gone through some stuff to learn that the hard way.
Amen, brother. Dude, I love what you just said, that if your intentions are good, you'll naturally succeed. I really, really believe in that. And there was a lot of things you said that I believe in. Number one, or the first thing that you said that I also believe in, which is people need a moral compass, a spiritual, a direction, whatever that is. I know you and your wife don't share the same quote unquote religion.
Correct.
But you guys have the same moral compass, and that's really powerful. And that when you have something that helps you align with your ethical standards, I think that's always worth pursuing, because I think people are just naturally good humans. It's not like people are like, I want to hurt that guy.
Right.
And so if you I don't know how you said it, but I believe in it. If you don't believe in anything, you're lost, or you can get lost. And that's well said. You need something.
Yeah.
That transitions right into that quote that you said. It was when I was visiting Houston with my family, and it was the first time I'd actually really seen you. Gosh, in like 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's
maybe
been a
like
while.
10 years. And I think, the last time I had seen you, I was passing through Houston for like the Comic-Con thing. I think maybe we got lunch. Maybe I didn't even see you. I was just with your dad, and maybe you were at school. Nonetheless, this last trip, I got to see your success in real time. You showed me the office space that you and your partners were acquiring. I think I saw one of your billboards, and I met your wife, your big ass beautiful dogs, and I remember just being so proud of you, and not just being like proud of you because you're my family, but like seeing the man that you had become. And we were having brunch, and I asked you something like, when did you decide to go to law? I think that was the question I asked you. And, or what made you go in this path? You said, I knew I had to be the one. So I don't know if you want to unpack that a little bit, because I think that's a really mature thing you said, and it came at a young age.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and sometimes I say things, and it's doing certain professions or going through certain tasks or journeys, let's call them journeys, right? Because going through 4 years of university and then 3 years of law school and 12 years of grade school before then, it's a grind, right? And it's costs a lot of money. And if you're going into it, half-heartedly, you're inevitably either going to hate it or you're not going to follow through with it. And it's as a young kid, and you know me, I'm a bit of an extrovert for the most part. I'm a people's person, which I think kind of makes me a better at my job and what the things that I do. I've always seen what other family members have gone through as far as struggles, and as we don't come from money, right? Our families have struggled. Our families are immigrants. Our moms, our dads come from a different country to live and chase their American dream, and it's a vicious cycle, sadly. They inevitably end up in a job where they really can't they can better their situation. They might be able to get out of an apartment and get into a house, but really much more than that, you can't. And at one point in my life, because growing up with a dad who worked in construction, right, a laborer, I remember we would pick up cans and crush them and take them to the recycling. I'm sure you've gone through similar experiences, and I would go work with my dad on the weekends and make a little bit of extra cash. It got to the point where I was like, man, I really don't want this to be the future for myself. I certainly don't want this to be the future for my children. And so what I'm going through, I will be the last person, at least in my direct family, that's going to go through this. And so I am going to be the one that is going to break that cycle, and nothing is going to get in my way of that. And with that mentality, everything seems like a cakewalk. You know what I mean? Like going to school, studying, taking the bar. These are really, as us young people say, first world problems. They're challenging things, but they're things that could be easily overcome with a little bit of sweat equity, right? Just working hard at it, and really believing that you can do it. Is at the end of the day, a lot of people, whenever they tell me, "Oh, well, I wanted to be a lawyer," and really the reason why they don't go out and chase their dreams or pursue their endeavors and see them all the way through is because they don't believe that they can do it. And I feel like that's one of the biggest roadblocks that people have, right? I'm young. I forget how old I am. I'm maybe 32. I think I turned 33 this year. And I still have a lot of things that I want to achieve, but the mindset of I can do it and nothing will get in my way, I think, has played a major role in some of the successes that I have, because still wouldn't consider myself successful. I think I've achieved a lot of things, but I think I still have a lot more to achieve, which is kind of crazy to say. And I don't want to sound foolish saying that, but I really believe that. I think I still have a lot more that I need to achieve in the future,
There are two things that you said really stood out. One thing, one thought. One is when your mindset is made up, it's a cakewalk, because you know the sacrifice that you have to make. It's not you made the choice, you don't have to make that choice again. And it comes from what you said. It comes from I don't want anyone in my family to go through this anymore. I'll be the last one. That's a really mature way of thinking. The reason why I respect that so much is my family changed, right? My family went from being super poor to having more, having options. And so I never actually I did go through the crushing cans that you were talking about and all that, but my life changed before I could actually make that real mental decision. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it goes to my thought of there's so many people our age, younger than us, older than us, that their parents did all the work, made it so easy for them. So that idea of like I have to be the one is not, they don't even understand that.
Yeah.
And so I believe what I got from that was it makes sense why people don't finish something, because they've never had to really like struggle
Yeah.
to understand what it takes or why they need to do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That need, they don't feel, and it's not to undermine, just because you have had a life of privilege. Like some of the hardest working people that I know are people that come from privilege, people that come from parents that were either attorneys or were already successful. So I don't want to undermine those people, because there's still
Of
wealthy
course.
people that, because it's hard work to stay wealthy. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
but you have to
And
go.
maintain the wealth from your family.
Exactly, exactly. But I think there is some beauty, I think is the term, to the struggle, right?
Yep.
Everybody says it. The
Yeah.
struggle is real. I've struggled, but struggling alone isn't a precursor, isn't a trigger. It's what you do with the struggle. You know what I mean? Because everybody's struggle is different. But the struggle is still the struggle, and how you view it. If you victimize yourself and just say, "Oh, woe is me, my life sucks, boo-hoo," you're never really going to get any better. If you're in a situation where you're not happy, I'm a firm believer of everything is within our control. Like the concept of, you know, and I'm saying this from a very superficial level. Homelessness in the United States, there are people that have mental issues, and no matter what they do, they need support and help to get out of it. But
Agreed.
if you're perfectly sane, and you have all your senses and capacities, it's silly for you to be homeless in this country. This country provides so many incredible opportunities. You just have to go out and get them. You could make a lot of, and forget about a lot of money. You can make a comfortable living in this country by just simply getting out there and working. And
I have a problem with here in Utah when I see people holding up signs outside of like a McDonald's
yeah,
that I'm- that I've and you're right. If they're mentally something, I think we've lived in big cities. We know what
yeah, yeah,
mentally
yeah,
challenged people are.
yeah,
However, when you pull up in like a little goat moped or something like that, you're holding up a sign on my brother, go inside and ask for a job.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and look, and it's easier said than done, right? Everybody's down on their luck at some point, and there's no shame in asking for help, but it there is so many opportunities available to everybody in this country. You can make a lot from nothing, and we are living proof of that, right? Our family comes from nothing. Literally, they came into a whole different country, learn a language that they didn't understand, and try their darn best to provide the best life that they could for their kids. And fortunately, look, sometimes you could do the best as you can, and there are limitations if you're undocumented or if you lack the education. At least they're putting their children in this situation. Our parents put us in a situation to where we can go out and get an education, or we can go out and at least have the opportunities to achieve something. And that's really, that all you need is the opportunity, right? Whether you take it or not
Facts.
is on you. And the opportunity, if it presents itself, you got to take it. That's one of the biggest things people need to learn. If the opportunity presents itself, you got to take it. If you don't, you're the only person to blame for that, nobody else.
Yeah, I actually do agree and believe in that, and also that you are in direct control of your choices. You can say yes and no, and saying no is actually the hardest thing to do.
Yeah,
There was a time where I would write no on my hand, so I could just remember to say no to things. Just like, and you don't have to. The other part is you don't ever have to give an explanation for no. Do you know what I mean? If
yeah,
someone says, "Hey, do you want a drink?" and the answer is no,
yeah,
you have to explain yourself.
yeah,
And so, and it's a hard thing because it's you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
control. It's you control your destination that way. Um, Speaking of choices and growing up, you went from Utah to Vegas, right?
Yeah, so we went first from Utah to Texas,
Oh,
lived in
okay,
Texas for a long time, and then there was a small pocket of time during like the boom, in the early 2000s, and then went back to Texas. So we were in Vegas
gotcha.
for about a little under 4 years.
So okay, so Texas is essentially like
Yeah, it's home base.
home base, baby.
Yeah,
Texas.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you fit in Texas. Um, what? I mean, and you're in Houston. There's like ridiculous amount of Hispanic people in Houston.
Yeah.
What's it really like kind of growing there and sticking out in a positive way? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. So I'll tell you this, Houston, and I am one of the biggest spokespeople for Houston. I try to convince everybody to move to Houston. I think it's the promised land. I don't care what anybody says. I think Texas is the promised land, but Houston in particular,
I'll
specifically
buy a
because,
house out there,
look, it's cheap. There's no state income tax, and it
and
is
you got
one of,
Bucky's.
hey, that's what I'm saying, dude. And it is one of the most diverse places on the planet. It is one of the biggest cities in the world as well. One of the biggest, I think, top four biggest cities in the U.S. One of the biggest cities in the world. There are streets that you can drive on in Houston where you will have every ethnic restaurant you can think of: Mexican, Indian, South African, African, Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese, and the people, it's a very rich culture. Inevitably, right, there's a lot of Hispanics because it's the closer you get to the border, this used to be Mexico back in the day, and so there's going to be a lot of Hispanic folks, but there's not just Mexican, but there's Hispanic people of all sorts and people of all different religions, and it's an incredibly vibrant city in my opinion, and one that is continuously growing and expanding, and I think for good reason. I think it's, the economy is booming. This is why I would never leave. But being in a diverse place really kind of opens your eyes to the realities of the world, because you hear things, right? Like me being a personal injury lawyer, although we do cater heavily to Hispanic folks because me and my partner are both Latinos and we speak Spanish. We get folks from all over the world that are either visiting or live here in Houston from different cultures, and we hear stories. I've got Cuban clients that would tell me like, hey, I used to fish, which in Cuba is illegal, in case you didn't know, because the government owns everything, and fishing is literally illegal unless you work for the government. And so, because you're taking resources from the government, and hear crazy stories like that really kind of gives you some context to your experience here and how it's different from everywhere else, which makes you appreciate things a little more.
Why did you decide to go into the law that you did?
So that's a great question. As long as I could remember, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that my mom comes from a long line of Mexican lawyers in Mexico, which is totally different than here in the States,
I
unfortunately.
had no idea, dude.
Yeah. So my mom and then all of my uncles and aunts and uncles in Mexico are attorneys. Now that doesn't hold the same value as it does here. Attorneys like a 3-year degree in Mexico, and it's like any other job. And
That's
licenciado doesn't.
amazing.
It's not the same level as here in the U.S. Not to undermine their education by any means, but it is, you do require more training, and you are a little more prestigious here in the U.S. when you're an attorney because you are a Juris Doctor, right? You have this postgraduate degree, but whenever you really understand the way that this country works, you realize that some of the most powerful people in the country are attorneys. Why? Because you spend a substantial amount of time understanding and learning the way that things work, right? You could be a doctor, but you will always need a lawyer. You're always going to need a doctor, but doctors, whenever you get to a point where who is the one person that you're going to need to do anything. You buy a house, the title companies are using lawyers. You're a doctor, you want to open up a hospital, you want to open up a clinic, you're going to need a lawyer to look over everything. You know what I mean? You want to draft change, you want to start a business, you're going to need a lawyer. And so I feel like lawyers have the access or the tools that will help you achieve almost anything. Historically, this country has been led by men who come from legal backgrounds. Not all of them, but most of them have some type of legal background. And so you start to see a trend, here in Houston where I live. There's a neighborhood called River Oaks, right? River Oaks. That's I don't know what the equivalent is in Salt Lake City or in Utah. That's where the rich people. Back in the day, it was a bunch of oil barons and doctors living in River Oaks. If you go there now, it's a bunch of lawyers. lawyers are living in these multi-million-dollar homes. And so it tells you something, right? There's a trend there that I picked up on that says, or that told me that, hey, look, this is something you should consider. And it only reinforced my original desire. It just added some concrete, hey, look, these guys are making it, you can too. And so I took it and ran with it.
I love it. That's I think it's important for people to see what's possible, because if you don't see what's possible, you never know what's possible. And also, there's a lesson in that, because depending on the mindset of the parent, they could teach you to be jealous of those people and be upset that woe is me and life's unfair, or it's, hey, if you want something like that, it's going to require XYZ. You can do
Right.
it, but it's going to require XYZ. Something that I've really believe in.
Yeah.
Let's transition to your gaming life.
Okay.
Weren't you a pro gamer at some point?
I was. Yeah. Believe it or not, even with immigrant parents who didn't like us playing video games, I still loved
Suck
and
it, mom.
love them. Yeah. And they said you're never going to amount to anything. Video games will never get you anywhere. I fortunately had, for whatever, I don't know why. I think it's just, it was available to me, but I love video games growing up. And from the very, I remember there was a time in my youth where I lived in Mexico for a few years. Things were a little rocky between my parents, and so my mom took me and my siblings, and we lived in Mexico for a few years, while my dad was figuring his things out here. And I remember my mom bought me like a Super Nintendo, like the original ones with the cartridges that, yeah, I guess you had to blow in all of them. But that was my start, dude. That was my start, and I just, I stuck with it. I loved it. My mom fortunately bought me game, very, very obviously sacrificing a lot to give me something that's not a necessity. And that just evolved and grew and eventually turned into the Super Nintendo, to Nintendo 64, to the Game Boys, to the Game Boy Colors, the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP, all the way to Xbox, PlayStation, and then now PC. And and to eventually what came into, I guess, cash prizing at tournaments and stuff like that, where I think, and my parents to this day still don't really see a value in that,
That's
but I
hilarious.
saw it enough to where I was like, man, this is worth something. I was one of the first guys on what's now known as Twitch. Back then it was called Justin.tv. And the original, and the some of the OG days of YouTube. I unfortunately didn't have the luxury of having my parents support my dreams, right? Because they literally didn't have the funds. I had to go and do something with my life to be able to pave my own way, which, fortunately was through sports and school. But yeah, man, at an early, before and while I was in college, I was a professional Gears of War player, and I did dabble a little bit on the professional Halo scene, because I was an Xbox Microsoft guy, and dabbled a little bit with the Call of Duty. I was never really fantastic at, as good at Call of Duty as I was at Gears of War, and then slightly less better at Halo, but I was still pretty good. And competed early days. There's a website called Game Battles, what's now turned into MLG, which is, no, not really a thing anymore, because, business is hard. But yeah, dude, that was what got me into it. I stuck around it, and I had friends that stuck around it. And so when I became a lawyer, I kind of got my foot back in the door and said, hey, look, I love video games still. Let me help you guys. And it turned into what it is now.
You've lived like multiple lives. You right, college student. You also played football. Did you
Yeah,
play football for
I did.
both of the universities, or
Yeah.
just one?
Yeah, I did.
And that obviously opened up doors and network or connections that you still have today, right?
Correct. Yeah.
How many of the dudes that I can't think, Jake is the
Yeah.
only one that
Jake is one of them. Huh?
did you go to school with all of them? Jake
Yeah. I went to school with all those guys. Yeah, and Jake and I actually became really close in law school, because he's also an attorney. All his partners in that business are all professional athletes. One of them played for the Browns, and the other one played for the Colts and bounced around the league a little bit. but yeah, those guys are my teammates and my friends. And you when you find the right people, you kind of cling on to them, and they stick around for the rest of your days. And I'm fortunate to call those guys some of my closest friends to this day.
What and it goes, this is one thing I love about you, and I'm circling back, but your morals and your standards, because so unshakable. Even those guys, when I was hanging out with them, they're like, dude, your cousin doesn't drink, but he drinks like chocolate milk at the bar. I was like, yeah, that's the weirdest thing, but it makes sense. And then I think you were like, well, dude, they always had chocolate milk at the bar. I was like, that's the never even thought about that, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah, dude. And that's the thing. It's also important who you surround yourself with. Just because I'm carrying certain decisions that I make or life choices doesn't mean that you got to judge other people for their, like, I don't think less of people because they do drink. You know what I mean? It's just it's the decision they made, and I don't think you're less of a person because of it. But those people also have to equally respect you, right? Like, and when I was in college, I joined a fraternity, and I somehow managed to go through. My fraternity never hazed, but through the pledge process
That's hilarious.
to becoming a full-fledged member of a fraternity, becoming a full, D1 college athlete, without drinking, surrounding yourself around the people that respect your decisions and are not constantly trying to change you and the decisions you've committed because they respect you. It makes a big difference. Those are the people you want to have around, and the people that respect you and your decisions and are not constantly trying to shove it down your throat, because those guys, they'll fight on, somebody will say, hey, Nefi, you want to drink? And without me even saying, they're like, oh, he doesn't drink, like those are the kind of people you need, the people that are there to support you no matter what. And which is tough, by the way, as an attorney. There's a saying out there that, you can't trust an attorney that doesn't drink. Fortunately, people don't believe that, and people do trust me, and I'm glad they do. But, you hear all kinds of crazy things whenever you make certain decisions, like not drinking,
That I do also agree, and I think it's important to have people in your life that don't they love you for who you are, just like you
Yeah.
said, and can respect your point of view and you respect theirs, and that is very hard to come by. Very hard to come by.
Yeah.
When did you start doing the gaming lawyer stuff? And tell me a little bit about that and how
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, I couldn't really do anything on the legal side until after I graduated from law school. While I was in law school, I still played competitively, right? I had a team. The team that I played with was some of the, there's a game called Gears of War Judgment, and we had like the best team in the world. But then those guys knew I was in school, and so some of those guys ended up breaking out, going out to other titles. I ended up just making a lot of connections with other pro players because of my partner Jake. We had access to a lot of professional athletes, and we just kind of evolved that particular space. Him and I really kind of touched base because Jake was somewhat of a competitive Call of Duty player as well. And you've met Jay. Those dudes, I mean, those guys are units. They're massive humans. And so him and I together one day were just like, dude, we love video games. Obviously, we're familiar with this space. The entertainment space is huge. Twitch, Kick, YouTube streaming, live streaming was really starting to become like a big thing that people were doing, and kids were, whenever the answers to what do you want to do when you grow up, or what do you want to be when you grow up, when the answers change from a doctor, lawyer, firefighter, police officer to I want to be a YouTuber, I want to be a streamer, I want to be a professional gamer. You realize that society's values have changed. And so we took that and we said, look, dude, there's nobody that really provides a service. There are big law firms that provide entertainment services, right? That inevitably will help organizations do stuff, but there really wasn't anybody out there that was readily available to the average. When I say average, I'm not talking about like just Joe Schmo that plays video games, because it still costs money, right, to get our advice and help with stuff. But it wasn't readily available, and nobody was really educating and talking to people about the pitfalls of understanding this space. You have a lot of young kids who come upon a lot of money, or come upon a lot of legal intricacies of being a 15-year-old that just won $1 million playing Fortnite. You know what I mean? And so, um, there really wasn't any resources out there. And so my partner and I decided, and when I say my partner, I'm talking about my gaming partner, which is Jake.
Yeah.
Um,
Shout out Jake.
decided that we need, yeah, that we needed to talk about it, and we needed to educate the folks out there. And there was a real sort of want and need for it, that it took off. We started having people reaching out to us. We started having people invite us to events, invite us to venues, invite us to, and we sort of became almost spokespeople for the gamers, and the organizations as well. It's kind of crazy how it all evolved, and we eventually kind of put a foot in the space, and then people just embraced us with open arms, and it just kind of, and we would get invited to all these cool events and do all these things and meet all these cool people, to the point where it's evolved not just in video games, but we now work with professional athletes. I've got dudes that play in the Major League Baseball, play in the NFL. Some of them play in the NBA. We help people with NIL deals too. Now that's the NCAA is allowing young college athletes to get paid, which I think is great. It's we've become a resource to people, and when there's a need, you gotta, and you fill it. There's always going to be people reaching out to you, and we took it and we ran with it. And it's been amazing. And
What's the name of the talent agency?
the name of our talent agency is called Focused Talent Management. And that particular business consists of me and two other partners, Thomas Spencer, who lives out in Dallas, and then Jake Hicks, who's my esports law partner. And we together represent all kinds of different people for all kinds of different things. We also work as middlemen for these large talent agencies. And we actually do a lot of work with professional athletic agencies that only help with like brand deals and sponsorship deals, because everybody that's up and coming now, they grew up with video games, and so there's a void there that they can't fill, and so they reach out to us, say, hey, this guy wants a gaming brand sponsorship, or wants a gaming collab, or wants to build a studio in their house for them to stream, right? And so they put us in contact with us, and we set them up, and we get them. One of the coolest things we worked on is we've even worked as professional consultants for a casino that wants to build an esports arena in the casino for esports and gaming betting, and then also hosting these multi million-dollar video game either expos or tournaments or events. It's crazy. I mean, there's so much money in the field, and people are out there that they're really trying to get in on it, which is great. I think we need more.
When do you get a real job?
Well, it's that's what a lot of parents say to their kids. Why don't you just do something that's going to make you money, not knowing that it's a real career, man? Some of these guys are making a lot of money doing it, which is wild. But people place high value on entertainment, and that's what we're doing. Creating content is entertainment. People now don't watch cartoons and TV anymore. They watch YouTube, and they watch Twitch, and Kick, and all these other platforms. That's what people care for now.
Yeah, they watch street. It's so interesting. They watch people doing. There's two things. People watch people living life,
Right.
and then people watch people playing games.
Yeah.
And that one to me is even more fascinating because this is a way that a lot of the youth are getting their news and opinions, and
it's a double-edged sword, really.
yeah, it's hey, but it is what it is, right? Like that's just the world that we live in. So you can't talk trash on it because it's just reality.
Yeah, it's more accessible. Anybody can do it. Is the thing, anybody can do it.
Yeah. Well, dude, I really only have just really one more main question. You kind of already answered it, but I always like to ask, what is your life philosophy?
I think one of the biggest things that I kind of cling on to whenever I make decisions, whenever I do anything, is making sure that whenever you're dealing with people, because everything that we do in life, we're dealing with people, right? I think the people that are good with people are the most successful people. And I know I said people a lot, but the idea is, if you treat others with no intention of seeing how you are going to get out of it, your dealings with everybody else are going to be better. Whenever obviously it's inevitable if you're in a business, there's a relationship, right? When clients come to me, they come to me because they need help. And I see them as somebody that I can put them in a better position. And there is ultimately a benefit to me. But whenever I'm making new relationships or going on new endeavors, I never go in asking, well, what can you do for me? Right. And at the end of the day, when somebody's pitching you like some type of proposal or an investment idea or something like that, you have to ask those questions, right? It'd be stupid not to ask those questions. But whenever you're wanting to do something new, or you meet a new connection, for example, for those of you guys that are trying to build a business or trying to get into a particular space, um, don't use people as a means to an end. That's one of the things that I learned pretty early on, and especially like in the gaming and entertainment space. If I'm making friends with one of the talent managers or with one of the social media managers or with somebody that has a position of power, with only the end goal is I want to use you as a connection to this, your relationship at some point is going to you're going to come to cross paths where they're going to realize, like, is this person really, does he really care for me? Does he only want to use me? And then it's going to essentially shake. If you're building a foundation on using people as a means to an end, your relationships are going to fail inevitably. Whether it's your spouse, whether it's your business partner, whether it's your employees, if you treat people as people and you truly care for them, because you can achieve both, right? Whenever you meet somebody and you're asking yourself, well, how can this person make my life more valuable, you're not really looking at it from the right perspective. You will, if you meet somebody, you say hello and you genuinely want to get to know them and become their friends or whatever, or engage in some type of business endeavor. Um, your outs and how you look at it, I think, plays a big role, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. I get invited to a lot of events where people are, you're rubbing elbows with very influential and very powerful people, and if you're looking to meet them and become friends with them because they can put you in a better position, people can see through that. You know what I mean? There's some guys that I've met that I've become really good friends with over the years that I had no idea who their parents were or who they were or who their business partners were or how wealthy they were. And we become friends and they're inviting me to all these things. And the more I hang out with them, I'm like, holy crap, like, who is this guy I'm dealing with? It turns out that his family own a long string of casinos and are, uber rich folks that have access to a lot of things and are able to help me with some of my endeavors, because again, you become friends with them. Some of the people that are most successful have the best relationships with the people that have organic relationships. And so the key is treat people as people. That's which is hard to do, because everybody wants to make themselves better and make the situation better. It doesn't matter whether it's the janitor at your office building or the next biggest, person that's leasing office space in your building. Treat them the same. If you meet somebody famous, don't treat them like normal people. Everybody's human, and they will respect you more for that. And your relationships will flourish. I can guarantee you that.
That's a really amazing life philosophy.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Love you too, cousin. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon.